Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Roscoe from Goose Creek PD in South Carolina, 37 years total in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Roscoe. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to it. So, give us a little bit of background. 37 years is a long time to be in law enforcement. Is this something that you always knew you wanted to do, or how did that happen?
Actually, it's not. I originally was going to go to school to become a college coach. That was my goal.
Okay.
Although I can tell you there's probably a lot of parallels other than the fact that I'm not making near the money I would make if I was a college coach. Um, so I actually got into the field. I had a friend from high school and early on in college that was a police officer in the upstate of South Carolina. And unfortunately, she took her own life.
Mm.
And after seeing that, attending that funeral, which was the first funeral I had ever attended in my life, because I was about 19 or 20 at the time. And I saw the officers that came from near and far to attend that service that had never met her, but they were just there, the camaraderie that I saw. I literally went back. I was living in Atlanta at the time. I had driven 2 hours to the service. And on that 2 hour drive back, I made the decision to apply for my local law enforcement agency. So I literally came back in the first business day. I went and put in that application.
Wow.
I was ultimately hired. I spent 30 years at DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. I retired as a chief deputy there, and I retired to take the job here. I was offered the position here at Goose Creek as the chief of police. I was nearing retirement, so I was actively looking because being a chief of police was always the goal. Once I got into law enforcement, that was the goal. So after I retired from DeKalb County, I literally had 1 week in between the day that I left there and the day that I got sworn in here and started. So, and I've been here now 7 years.
Wow. I want to talk about a couple of those things, but the tragedy that you were a part of and, seeing that firsthand really set a trajectory then for the rest of your life and your career. Do you think that that is a part of your why? And I obviously know that wellness is something and mental health is something that's really important to you. Do you think that that has always kind of stuck with you as a piece of your why?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely it's with me literally every day. As a side note, the city of Goose Creek, we created a program not too long ago that's for the community. It's an Adopt a Goose program, and we have these basically 4 feet tall fiberglass geese that businesses can buy. They can have them painted. They're painted by our local artists, and they're placed in front of their businesses, and they look like whatever the business opts to paint, have them painted. So we have one in front of the police department, and it's painted like a police officer, and it's obviously they're geese because we're Goose Creek, and on the platform, all the geese are named.
Mm.
And this goose that sits in front of our police department has the name of the officer that I just referenced that took her own life. And on the uniform that's painted on the goose, it has her last name. So, yes, this is something that's been with me and is with me every day.
Wow. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I know that that's a hard thing to go through and it's difficult sometimes to be vulnerable and to share those things. So I really appreciate you doing that. And I really believe that some of the hardest things we go through in our lives become one of our biggest opportunities to help others. And it sounds to me that that's what happened here. You took something that was incredibly difficult, and now you're using it as an opportunity to help others and to prioritize wellness in hopes that someone else won't reach a point where they feel like they have to take their own life as well.
Correct.
So you were a coach. What sport?
I didn't coach. That was my goal. My goal was
Okay.
to be a coach.
For what sport?
I did well. I really I didn't know what sport. I was young. I just wanted to be a college coach.
Okay.
I softball, volleyball, and basketball in
Okay.
college. Softball was the primary sport, but I really at that age didn't have a clue. I
Right.
didn't like most people at that age. They're kind of trying to figure everything out. So
Yeah.
I didn't have a clue, but that was just the goal.
I appreciate you saying that because I've had a lot of conversations with other chiefs where they're like, yep, when I was 5 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And for you to be like, yeah, like I was 19 and I thought this is where I wanted to go, but maybe didn't have it all figured out yet. And that makes me feel better about myself because I was the same. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was that age. But I do want to draw some parallels to what you said of how, like, what you do now is very kind of similar to a coach or a mentorship type role. How do you think that maybe sports and law enforcement almost intersect, and I have some ideas on, and you said something earlier about like the camaraderie and kind of the team environment, but what parallels have you found between the two?
Well, exactly that. There is a team environment. As cliche as it sounds, I tell everybody we are a family here. As dysfunctional as we may be at sometimes, we are a family here. And again, going back to the team approach, my goal, even before I had a title, right? Early on in my career, my goal was always to be there and mentor people and try to get them to be the best that they could be in their positions. And any information that I had education wise about the job, I wanted to share that. I wanted to impart any wisdom that I may have had on the next person to make sure that they then knew and then hopefully that they would pass that information on. So again, it's very parallel to coaching, and I mean, part of our job is actually called coaching, right? When we do evaluations, I mean, they tell us to coach and to mentor, and it's not just about leading. These things that lead up to leading. So there are a lot of parallels.
Yeah. Did you have any mentors in your career?
I'm going to tell you that people ask me that often. It was a different time when I started. Oftentimes, when I tried to latch onto someone, they were dissuaded from doing it because
Mhm.
back then it was more of, if you know what I know, then you'll take my job.
Okay.
So it was really hard. So I would say the last 4 years of my career at my former department, I did have some mentoring. The sheriff kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot in that last 4 years. But I would say the 26 years prior to that, no, it was more of a figure it out on your own. Because again, if I tell you what I know, then you're after my job,
Yeah.
which was the mentality. Um, Back in the day, that was the mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that we see that today still too in some ways, and I think it depends like on the people. But I've had that in my career in my life too, where everything is so highly competitive, that I think that there's maybe a mentality that it's like a zero sum game. But I really when I talk to people, I'm like, if you are elevating each other, you're elevating the team as a whole. And I think this goes back to kind of the sports, comparison. You want the team to win, which means you want the best players on the team. You want the best person next to you that's got your back, right? And so if we can all help each other to grow, it doesn't mean that someone's losing here. Everybody's winning because you're elevating the team. And I think that sometimes there is that kind of like competitiveness of like, oh no, they're going to be better than me. I want people to be better than me. I want the people in my circle to inspire me. I want to inspire them. And eventually, like, I want to be in a position where I can help to elevate other people to be even better.
100%. And one of the sayings that I always use is, if I'm the smartest person in the room, it's time to change rooms. Right?
Hmm.
I use that saying a lot. And I tell other people that because I need to learn. I mean, I'm continually learning. I learn every day. And I learn, it doesn't matter rank. I learn from everybody in my organization, whether it be, the line level officer or up to my captains. I mean, I learn something from people every day. And I hope to continue to learn every day.
I do too. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that having a learner and a growth mindset is a huge asset for anybody to have, regardless of where you are in your life or your career. If you can recognize that there are other ways of looking at things, there are other ways of doing things, that the way that you do it might be the best. way to do it, but it might also not be. And to have an open mind and the ability to have those conversations and learn from other people, I think is a huge asset for anyone to have. And we have all seen the opposite, right? We've all worked with people who are, they call them like stuck in your ways, right? Where it's like there's nothing getting to you, like this my way or no way, and this is how we do it. And it's frustrating, I think, to work next to people who don't have the ability to learn and grow. And I don't want to be the same person I was last year or yesterday. I want to feel like I'm always improving.
Exactly, me as well. And I'll give you a quick example about the change. So I personally am opposed to the outer carriers that the officers wear.
Okay.
I just don't like the look. It's just a me thing. And I said for years and years and years, as long as I was the chief, we're never going to go to outer carriers. And, the officers would ask every so often, can we get outer carriers? Well, I'm a realist. I'm not the one that's out there every day working the 12-hour shifts in the weather, in the heat, in the cold, and the rain. I'm not the one doing that. They are, and I finally, succumb to the pressure, if you will. But again, just because I don't personally like it, if this is something that's going to make it better for my officers, let's talk about wellness. If this is something that they feel is going to help their back, help their hips, you know, be a position where, we have really hot summers here in this area. If it's something that they'll be able to come into the squad room to do a report and be able to take it off super easy and get some relief, then it was worth it to me.
Yeah.
You talk to the officers previously, they probably were all, grumpy and saying I was stuck in my ways. But again, for me, it was there was enough of a reason to do it despite my not liking them, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
That makes total sense. And I actually appreciate that you related it back to wellness. I think that I mean, you said some things that were tactical, right? If we can make them more comfortable, if we can give them relief, if, it can make their job easier, better. But I also think that working within an organization where people feel like they're valued and the things that they're asking for are being heard, I think that that also contributes to that culture, right? And so I think that there's a deeper level to that of them now being like, well, chief didn't like it, but because it makes my life better, agreed to it. I think that shows that you care and it shows that you're listening to people. And so I think that it helps to build that morale over time.
Hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. So you said that when you got into this career, things were really different than they are now. And I know when we talked offline, you said that you've kind of seen the evolution of probably a lot of things, how things used to be done versus now. And in the context of wellness and, the stigma that maybe used to exist versus now, what have you seen as far as the evolution of wellness and stigma and, the maybe receptiveness to resources or asking for help?
Sure. So critical incidents when I first came into law enforcement, they were just that. They were a critical incident. We could go handle a critical incident at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then at 10 o'clock, we had to go to an elementary school to read a book to a kid. There was no let's debrief. There was no let's talk about how you feel about it. Let's get somebody that you can talk to. There was none of that. It was just expected that, this is part of your job and the saying we suck it up and move on. That was real. That was real. And that was real. And I'm sure there's probably some organizations that's probably still their reality. However, the Goose Creek Police Department and me personally have tried to get rid of that stigma here because I understand that, these people, especially the younger generation, they didn't come up that way. They didn't come up with that same mentality that I came up with even my parents, right? I mean, my parents are still married. They've been married 56 years. I mean, but my father was strict. And it was kind of that, suck it up mentality and keep it moving. So I think with the generation that we see entering the police force now, they weren't raised that way. So we have to acknowledge that, acknowledge the difference, and understand that things hit differently, if
Mm,
that makes sense.
yeah.
Uh, so I have tried to implement a practice where when we have a critical incident, we immediately contact resources to come in to assist with the debrief. We normally do it as a group, and then we allow individual meetings with whoever we call in as resources, and of course, there's follow up that can be done immediately thereafter. The phone numbers are given out, email addresses are given out. So if an officer doesn't feel comfortable in the presence of his colleagues, or even at that time being seen going into a room, to talk to a counselor,
Sure.
the resources are provided so they can do it at a later date or time when they feel more comfortable. But I, as our chief, want to make sure that if nothing else, the resources are provided.
Yeah. Do you wish that maybe there was more support earlier now that you see kind of the other side of things? Do you think that that would have helped with long-term mental health?
I do 100%. I think that there's a lot of things that I can't unsee. There's a lot of things that whether we have resources or not, we can't unsee. But I think that if I had been given some resources at the time, maybe I could have worked through the process and maybe it's not that I didn't understand it, but maybe understand how it made me feel a little bit differently than the way I was forced to deal with it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I really like that you use the words of like being able to work through it. And visually, I'm a visual like learner. And so I see like you like walking through the storm, right? Being able to work through those things. And I think that that's the goal with all of this. It's like, how can we recognize that these things are really challenging? And then what are the things that can be put in place so that you can work through it and get to the other side of it? And, you know, to your point, maybe it's gonna leave a scar, but you're gonna be okay because we got the resources for you to get through it. And I think that historically, to your point, and I really relate to this because I was also raised in an environment that for me, my environment wasn't great, different than yours. I'm not comparing my situation to your upbringing, but I think I also grew up in a situation where it was like you shoved it down and you postured up and you learned how to survive. And like, and for me, like that was really detrimental for my own wellness, and that impacted me really negatively long term. And when you don't work through those things, they can all come bubbling up to the surface. And so how can we get people to the other side of the quote unquote storm? So I like that you use that word of getting through it.
And in law enforcement, we do need to make sure that officers get through it because, like you just said, you don't want 5 years down the line for stuff to bubble up because in this field, that can present as an excessive use of force.
Yep.
It can present in a civil rights violation, and it could be an officer that you've never had an issue with, and then you realize that the culmination of 5 years worth of critical incidents or 5 years worth of trauma have gotten to where they are at that point where now you have an excessive use of force. So again, I think it's really important to make sure that these officers know that there are resources out there. If you watch, I know this sounds cheesy, but if you watch TikTok videos and you see these officers that are doing these TikTok videos that say, "Hey, I've been in it 2.5 years and I just turned in my resignation. I've been in it 4 years and I'm just turning my resignation," and they're complaining about the toxicity, they're complaining about the lack of support, they're complaining about the things that they've seen, and I want to ensure that my officers don't feel that way. Number one, I mean, granted, we are always going to lose people in this profession that just didn't understand exactly what they were going to get into, like any profession. But I don't want an officer to leave here after having been through a critical incident and specifically name the fact that they didn't feel like they had the departmental, city, or my support or resources to get through whatever their issue was.
100%. Yeah, I was just having this conversation recently about this idea of like, and I think you would agree because of what you just said, but you would rather have the resources and some people feel like maybe they don't need it versus not having them and people feel like they need it. And so it goes back to this idea of how can we be proactive with resources? How can we focus on prevention for some of these things? And I know that there's a conversation always about resources and budgets and all the things, but it's like, what place would you rather be in? Would you rather have it and not need it or the opposite?
Well, and let's think about the cost. I'm fortunate because we have an EAP program that I can pick up on, and I can have a counselor from our EAP here, within hours, if not sooner. But if you think about, let's talk about a small organization. If the budget is an issue, what's more costly though, to pay for a counselor to come in to talk to staff, or to lose an officer and then have to pay to replace them and retrain somebody that, so I think that if you look at it from that perspective, financially, it makes sense as well. I mean, policing is a business, I get it, but our officers need to come first.
100%. Yeah, you might appreciate this because it's a sports analogy. I've been doing a lot of like kind of deep dive research because my goal is for wellness to be seen as tactical athletic training. And you look at all of these professional athletes and they do all of this. They have therapists, they do nervous system regulations, they can make effective decisions, under pressure. They work out, they focus on their mobility because they understand that, if they don't bend, they break. That's my whole saying. If you don't bend, you break. And so how can we make sure you don't break? They do all of these things as a part of their training regimen. And it's so normal, all the things that they do. And obviously, you guys are at a much higher stake, right? You guys are seeing more things. Like there's even more emphasis on the mental health side of things and the resources that you guys need. But I'm in context of, kind of breaking the stigma, but then also understanding that your people are your most valuable asset. And, we'll take it to sports. Sports teams don't want their most valuable assets, their players, to be broken or to quit, right? They invest millions of dollars in them. And it's the same thing. It's like, how can we make sure that we're protecting the asset? Like that's what we want to do at all costs, is protect the asset, because really your people are the most valuable asset. You can't operate without everyone within the organization, every role within the organization. And so I agree with you. It's how can we be more proactive and preventative in that regard. And then also, you can go back to, the experience that you had, that we talked about at the beginning. It's like, that's the ultimate cost that we want to avoid. Is people feeling like they don't have the resources to where, now they feel like the only option is to take their own life. So how can we be proactive in reducing that risk as much as possible? You had an article written about you. I want to kind of give you a shout out. What was this article about? Give us a little bit of context.
So unfortunately, we had a critical incident. It's been maybe 2 years ago now. It was a double homicide suicide, and it involved a child. And it was rough. It was rough for everybody. It was rough for my dispatchers. It was rough for my officers, my SWAT team. It was obviously not a good scene. I was on scene. I tried to prevent as many officers from going into the scene as possible. I tried to minimize because I knew that it was not. I mean, it was a tragic situation. It wasn't a good scene, right? So I immediately, again, like I was saying, I immediately contacted and had resources here at the police department. I believe it was probably the next day. So the FOP, Fraternal Rural Police, picked up on that, and they basically wrote an article just using that as an example of how to move forward with critical incidents. And they just kind of gave me kudos. And again, it's not me; it's the department, it's my staff. I mean, I think that anybody that thought that through would have done the same thing, but I'm happy that I was able to think it through having been on that scene and
Yeah.
seen all the things that I saw and the things that my officers had to see to get somebody in here. And a couple people were not okay. And it's okay to not be okay. Um, what's not okay is to not utilize resources when you're in that position. And fortunately, everybody that needed to did.
Good.
And they understood when I told them, I understand it was not a good scene.
Yeah.
So here are, resources. Again, like I mentioned earlier, they could talk in the group, and then afterwards, the therapist stayed for individual conversations, and furthermore, gave the information for them to contact her later on if they needed that. And again, we have the EAP. So, in addition to that one specific counselor that came out as a result of that incident, we also have, partners in that with our EAP that if an individual wanted somebody else or wanted to talk to somebody specific, they can do so.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And the thing that kind of popped up in my head, because I've had a lot of conversations with leadership, and how do you take care of yourself at the end of that? Because I know you were so like, okay, we're going to take care of our people. We're going to make sure that they have all the resources. At the end of the day, as an executive, how do you take care of you?
Yeah, it's hard. And you mentioned that the comment it's only at the top, and it is. It really is because you don't gripe down, right?
Mhm.
You gripe up, which is what I teach my people. Don't complain down, complain up. Well, who do I complain to? So,
Right.
uh, fortunately, I have friends that I think that are not in law enforcement that will listen. They may not understand, but they'll at least listen, which is I'm very thankful for. Uh, as far as the physical element, I like to run. So going to the gym or running when things get really, really stressful is always a benefit.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's kind of how I work through things. I have two police dogs, so if I have to go train with the police dogs for an hour, step away and go run with the dogs for an hour, it's helpful.
Yeah. I have puppy fever. I really want a dog right now. And every time I hear about, there's a lot of agencies now that are getting, canines and emotional support animals. And I'm like, how do I get one of those? I want a little buddy because I do think that that does help a lot with stress. But I also agree with you, physical fitness, just getting out of your head for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever you can allot, for yourself. It also helps you to become present. I don't know if people understand that, but like when you are doing a hard physical activity, right? Like you are focused on the task at hand because it's really challenging. So it actually helps to focus your mind more on the present moment and what's going on versus rumination of things that had happened in the past. So it does help with that clarity and presence mentally as well.
Well, and one of the evolutions that I've heard recently with therapy, a lot of people talk about the EMDR.
Hmm.
Um, so I did a little research on that, and that whole process came from somebody who was taking a walk.
Okay.
So, because the eye movements as you're walking, you're looking, and that's how that process actually started. So, even if somebody isn't really big into the physical fitness, going to the gym, lifting the heavy weights, I tell them go take a walk.
Hmm.
It's going to help. It's going to help. Take a walk. So, um, yeah, I think that that helps. It definitely helps me. Everybody has their thing, like the running with the dogs, or you know, like I said, going to the gym. It definitely helps me.
Yeah.
And we do have a therapy dog here at the department, and the dog is here for the officers, here for victims, here for whomever needs to use the therapy dog. It's a golden doodle, so we have that, and it's assigned. Actually, the dog is assigned to one of my investigators who works on the internet crimes against children
Mhm.
task force, which if you're familiar with, yeah. So
Mm.
she has that dog, and that dog's available to our victims. That dog also helps her, believe it or not, with our perpetrators because she'll have the dog when she's interviewing the suspects, and that's helpful.
Interesting. Okay, you said a couple really interesting things. So, one, I did not know that EMDR started from someone taking a walk. That is so interesting. I'm going to look that up because I think that that's fascinating. Um, and then the dog helping with the perpetrators. I can see that. I've never ever had any other chief say that before, but it brings down the walls, right? And it builds trust. And interesting. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to do some research on that EMDR for sure. That's really fascinating. One of the things that I really appreciated that you said is, your focus right now is how can you kind of eliminate hurdles? How can you make sure that your team is able to take advantage of these resources? And one of the things that, I hear all the time is time. Someone's like, I don't have time. I'm so busy. We don't have time. And so you've really tried to, emphasize things that you guys can do organizationally so that they can do, wellness activities on duty.
Certainly. So one of the first things that I changed when I came here was I added into our police department policy that officers are permitted to work out on duty, call permitting.
Right.
Uh, so they can come here. We have a small gym here at the police department. We are fortunate that our city is also really pro wellness. So we actually have a rec center that's within walking distance from the police department, and every employee and their spouse gets a free membership to that
Okay.
recreation as part of your employment here. In addition, our HR department does really well with offering different wellness plans, and it may be something small. We have a program called the Walker Tracker Challenge. It's an app that it's citywide, and periodically they'll throw up. It's a step challenge, is basically what it is. You download this app and you can either use your Fitbit or your phone or whatever device you have, and you compete against members within the city to see who gets the most steps. And it's positive both ways because it encourages people to step more, right? And they also earn a wellness hour, which equates to an hour of work off. They get to accumulate those wellness hours and then they can take a day off.
Yeah.
So just for participating, they get a wellness hour, whether they win or whether they don't win. Just for participating, they get an hour wellness hour. And so again, there's a lot of things that we try to do. I think the gym perspective helped. Again, our little gym here at the police department is open 24 hours a day. I just recently put new equipment. We bought new equipment for it, so there's pretty much everything in there. It's small, but I mean, there's everything in there you would need to get a good workout. And with our new recruits, uh, prior to them attending the academy, they're mandated to work out their last hour of work. So at 4 o'clock, they all go change out, and it's doesn't have to be anything structured, but they have to either go to the rec center and do something, or they have to go in our old gym and work out.
Mm, that's interesting. Just kind of an offshoot question to that. For the future, do you think that wellness will be mandated? Like you said, that maybe like recruits are mandated to do it, and when they graduate, they'll also be mandated. Do you think there's ever a world where wellness will be mandated?
Having run a training academy and worked side by side with other regional police academies, not likely. And let me tell you why. I've heard over many years and even recent years that when there was a really stringent physical fitness plan for the officers, that smaller departments had problems with that. And let me go a little bit more specific. I was told by academy directors that they would get phone calls from small town sheriffs or chiefs saying, "Hey, Bubba was all I could hire. He's all I got. He's not going to be able to perform this, but he can shoot and he can drive and he can pass these tests, and we need him on the road."
Got
And
it.
and and it's unfortunate, but I've heard this multiple times from multiple different people. So, unfortunately, our physical fitness standards overall in law enforcement have seen a decline,
Yep.
right? Because there's been such a pressure and a push to get officers on the road.
Yep.
Uh, here in the state of South Carolina, we have a physical abilities test that has to be performed prior to entering the academy. Georgia just adopted that same physical abilities test, but most agencies, in fact, when I was at my former agency, I was the only agency in the state that had a mandatory physical fitness policy. And it was not stringent. And it took me 2 years of research to put something into policy that I felt like would be legally sound. It
Mhm.
would not put the department in a position to be sued.
Mm.
But it was 2 years worth of research that went into that policy. And I don't think that since I've left, they have continued with the implementation.
Interesting. No, thank you for sharing that. And I've had, so many different conversations with chiefs in all different states. And, obviously, I think every department is different, every state is different. And so the conversation, I think, is really interesting to see, kind of what we think the future will look like. I know that there's some states that are kind of adopting this. Kind of physical fitness standard, but it's different than what it used to be. And they're really trying to cater more to like the realistic nature of the career. And so one of the examples I was given recently was, you know, it is an officer going to run a few miles, long period of time run, or are they more likely to sprint a short distance, and they're trying to understand like what are the things that our officers need to be able to do for the functions of the career, and then how can we implement, more of a standard that is relatable to that. And so it's an interesting conversation, so I appreciate your perspective.
If you want to talk about evolution, let me tell you how it used to be when I first got hired. So when I first got hired, we had to go to our local health department and they gave us a weight based on our height, based on our wrist size and our body frame. And I can tell you, I remember exactly what the weight was that they had assessed to me at that point. And once a month, we had to get on a scale and roll call, and they had to make sure that we weighed under that amount. And
Wow.
the event that we did not, we had until the 5th of the month. They would come into roll call for the first 5 days of the month and put you on that scale. So if you didn't make that weight on the first, you could get on the scale every day through the 5th. And as long as you hit that weight by the 5th, you were fine. If you didn't hit that weight by the 5th, you were suspended without pay until you could hit that weight. So if you could hypothetically hit the weight on the 6th, you could come in, so you'd only be suspended for 1 day. If it took you till the 30th of the month, you were suspended with no pay until the 30th of the month.
Wow.
So that ended up being problematic, as I'm sure you can figure out. We had an officer that unfortunately he was an older, I say older, I mean, he was probably at that time in his 40s, and he was a desk duty officer, and he had filed for exemptions, and he had been suspended so often because he couldn't meet that weight that he was in a position where he was about to lose his house. So he and his wife, and this was back in the 90s, he and his wife made the decision that he was going to undergo liposuction, and he did. And ultimately, he passed away in the recovery room.
Wow.
So you can imagine the lawsuit that ensued from that, and that's what it took to get that policy to change. But again, that's the evolution, right? I mean, and they didn't care how we got there. I remember officers had to be escorted to the scale with two other officers because the last 5 days of the month leading up to the first, they were taking diuretics, to try to drop the water weight so that they would make that weight on the first of the month, and that's not healthy either. I mean, you don't want that off
Mm.
being carried to a scale by 2 other officers to be out on the road.
Right.
That's not what you want. So that's a big evolution that took place during my career.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really good point to say like you don't want it to be too far in one direction, and that it certainly can if we start really trying to like say we're going to be this strict on certain things, that it could end up being something like that that's super unsafe and super unhealthy. Wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard that before either. You're blowing my mind right now.
Just to prove a point, I am still under that weight, that number.
You're like, it's
It
stuck with me for the rest of my life.
it has. And I remember exactly what they assessed me, so.
I cannot imagine a day today where everyone had to get on a scale in front of everybody
Yeah.
else.
Real tough.
Wow. Wow.
It really
Uh,
is.
so I know that one of your goals as chief is to be a mentor and to help bring up the younger men and women who are in this career today. And so what words of wisdom or advice would you pass on to the younger generation?
Well, I think that work-life balance is a very important thing. Again, not something that we had when I came up. I think that is a huge priority. I also think that as wellness in general, one thing that we haven't really touched on is financial wellness.
Mm,
And I think that with these younger officers, and I've had several that have come into my office and talked to me about paying their bills and the future and you want to buy a house and you want to get married and want to have kids. And I think that they need to utilize financial resources as well and look into that because that's not always something that we talk about. And the younger officers need to know these things. It's not taught in schools anymore. I mean, back when I was in school, we had distributive education that kind of at least gave you some basis about how to write a check and how to balance a checkbook. And of course, now we don't even have checks. But
right.
I think that these are things that these younger officers need to look into and utilize resources to try to figure it out so they can set their trajectory on the path that they want it to be on.
Mm,
So my words of wisdom are to again to work life balance and speak with a financial advisor. Talk to somebody about tax brackets. I mean, talk to somebody about how you can put money in this jar for this and money in this jar for that. As minuscule as that may sound, it will put them on a path that they want to be on so that when they do become retirement age, they're not fumbling.
yeah. Love it. Thank you so much for your time today and coming on here and talking to me for the last hour. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me.
Of course. We did it. How'd you feel?
That's good. Good.
I thought that was fun. I honestly, I think I told you when we first talked, I've done like 275 interviews with chiefs all across the country, and you taught me new things today. So I appreciate that because it's really interesting to hear some of the things that like had no idea, like the scale thing, that's crazy. And the EMDR thing, really interesting. So thank you.
I was at a seminar or something and they had somebody there that was she runs a company and does EMDR. That's what she does. And so she kind of got into the weeds on how it started and I can't remember the person's name, but I'm sure you can Google it. But yeah, it was a person that was taking a walk and from the eye movements while you were taking a walk realized that it changed the way they felt about whatever it was they were going through. So that's kind of the evolution from again what I was taught in this seminar. So
Yeah.
very interesting. It's
Very
interesting.
interesting. Yeah. I know a lot of people who have done EMDR and they rave about it. Like they say that it has been like really, really instrumental. A lot of people who I've talked to had like a lot of PTSD and they said that it helped a lot.
We're- We have
Well, I'll kind of set next steps. I do want to get you out here on time and be respectful of your time, but kind of next steps. So I'm gonna work on editing everything. Give me about a week to get you all the videos. I'm gonna have two folders for you. One is gonna be reels, so little highlight clips, and then the other one will be the full podcast. I have some chiefs that will review the entire thing, and I have some chiefs that like won't even look at it at all. But I have two asks at a bare minimum. One, if you can just make sure that everything looks good on your nameplate. So I have the right spelling of your name, your agency, and I have the right patch. So the name that's on here right now won't be there. It'll be like kind of designed. And then if you do review the video and you do have revisions, if you can just take note of the timestamp on the video for me so I can really narrow it down and take care of those edits. And then typically what I do is give you time to review. So however much time you need, there's no rush. And then we'll schedule a quick 5-minute phone call so you can either verbally give me a green light or verbally give me those revisions. So if I can get this to you by next Friday. How long do you think you need? Like a week, 2 weeks?
I will need a week is fine.
Okay. What is your schedule looking like on the 20th of February? Maybe around like 10 a.m. your time?
Yep, I don't have anything going on. You said 10 o'clock.
Yes, 10 a.m. your time. I'll send a calendar invite for it. So you'll have that. And then just as a kind of a heads up, this won't go live until probably like mid to end March on our platforms. But once we get that final version that you're happy with, you don't have to wait for me. So if you want to start sharing it with your team, friends, family, social media, whatever, you can. But I will keep you in the loop. So I'll let you know what day it's going to go live and send you the links and all that good stuff.
I just did a canine podcast that just went live, I think 2 days ago. So
A canine podcast?
I have two, they're in the room. Come here. Hey, come here. Come here.
Oh my
Here.
gosh.
Yeah, so I have come here, this, come here, up, here. Now they're like, you don't ever let us off. Come here, up.
Oh my gosh, I see an ear.
I'm gonna move the camera because it's a
Oh my gosh. Hi.
this is
Hi, pups.
but can we see it? I can't tell.
Yeah, I can. Hi, pups.
You're right, Goose. So
Goose.
here's Creek, and this one's Creaker.
Hi.
This Creaker is the affectionate one. Goose is like,
It's like so funny. I I I keep
that's
I keep telling my fiance, I'm like, because he's against it. He's like, nope, don't want a dog. Like, we're too busy. And I'm like, you are going to force my hand. Like, you are going to force me to come home with a cute little pup that you can't say no to. And he's like, nope, it's not going to happen. But I'm like looking all over because I'm allergic to a lot of dogs. So I have to be like very specific on what kind. So when you say like doodles, I'm like, I can get with most like doodles. So we're looking around. I'm looking around. He's not looking around at all, but I'm looking around because I have puppy fever for sure. I just think it'd be so fun in my office to have a little pup.
they're in here. They're in here with me. If I'm here, they're here, and that way, if the officers need me to go out on the road, I can throw one of them in the car and go because they're both working dogs. So
I also think that there's something to be said about feeling like you're not alone. Especially like when like things are stressful or hard. It's just nice to like feel like there's a buddy in your corner, Like we have a stray cat that comes around that likes to come inside. I'm allergic to cats too, so I have to like wash my hands after, but he'll come in and like he'll get a little scratch and I'll like lay on the ground. And anytime I'm like stressed, I just like open the door. I'm like, Smokey, and the stray cat comes running around and it just feels nice to feel like you're not alone.
these two, the little one, um, I rescued from the animal shelter. So she actually has her own magazine article that they published recently on her because I was a volunteer at the animal center and I had taken. She was either number 5 or 6. Every time they had a working line breed that came in, I would foster them and try to train them up
Hmm.
so that they could find a home. I found homes for all of them, and then when she came in, she was like about 12 weeks old, and I was like, oh. So I went to my city administrator and I said, hey, listen, I was going to budget money for an explosives dog because we don't have one. I said, we can still budget $15,000 for an explosives dog, or I can train her to be an explosives dog. What do you think? I said, I'm going to keep her no matter what. And my boss was like, do what you do. So at
Wow.
18, she got certified as an explosives dog. So
Wow. That's so cool. I have a friend who's volunteering at the shelter right now, and she's like in love with like 4 different dogs. I'm like, that's what happens. Like you have to know if you're gonna foster a dog or volunteer at the shelter that you're gonna find a dog that you fall in love with and you can't say no.
yeah, well, that's my long term, my personal long term goal is to start a canine training facility.
I love that. That's cool. You'll have to let me know, if you do that because, obviously like I have kind of our group of chiefs everywhere that have been on the podcast. And so I know a lot of them are talking about getting different canine dogs. So it could be maybe like in the future a connection where I could be like, hey guys, go
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. I'm working. I've got my LLC and I bought the domain name, but I'm trying to find land. Um,
Yeah.
Once I get this land squared away, I'm going to still be here. I'm going to start trying to get it started and going while I'm still employed here, but that's the long term goal.
I wish we would have talked a little bit about this on the podcast too, and maybe we can do a part two at some point, like once you are like kind of thriving in retirement and all that good stuff. But I think from what I understand and what I see, it's so important to have a plan and to like, be prepared for that transition. And so I love hearing that you're like, yep, I got a goal, I got a plan, like I'm already taking steps to get there so that when you do, get to the other side and transition into the next chapter of your life, you don't feel like lost. You feel like you have something that's waiting for you that you're excited about. And I talk to a lot of chiefs that are like, I have no idea what I'm going to do and I'm scared, and they have put so much into their career that now they don't know what to do after. So,
Well, and the other thing, like I said about the financial stuff, I listen to these young kids, and I mean, the pension's not what it used to be. You know, I mean, maybe in these union states, and I'm sure I mean, people in the union states, I mean, they still may, but here in the southern states, I mean, the pensions, it's just not what it used to be, right? So, I mean, these guys need to know it's time to start supplementing your pension now. I mean, don't wait until you've been here 20 years. And there were a lot of things that I didn't do, and then there was a lot of things that I did do. So, I mean, I was fortunate. I was fortunate,
yeah,
but I want other people to be financially fortunate as well,
yeah,
right? I mean, and I know it's hard. I know it's hard with a young family and like a child and diapers and formula. I get it, but there are things that they can do. They just have to make sacrifices, and that's a whole nother issue. I mean, some of them don't. They'd rather buy that vape than put that $15 in the account.
um, yeah.
But
We talk a lot about because I work with a lot. Obviously, I work with agencies everywhere, but we talk to a lot of the younger generation, and they're kind of like, "Oh, it's a problem for later," and that's kind of like the consensus. And I'm like, we want to set you up for success. We don't want you to reach the end and then there's a problem and now you're dealing with it. And so we talk a lot about short-term discomfort for long-term gain, and that's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, how can we, in the short term, start prioritizing some of these things that might be uncomfortable. Like maybe you feel like you're, scraping by a little bit right now, but in the long term, you're going to be so happy that, it happened. So I think it's just the message. I had a young guy recently, we were talking about like injury prevention stuff, and he like snickered kind of. And I was like, what's up? And he's like, yeah, I'm just young. Like, I don't have to deal with it. And I'm like, that's exactly why. Like, we want to keep you there. Like, if you feel good physically and mentally, like, we want to keep you there. Like, why wait until you're broken and, bubbling up everywhere for you to then deal with it? So I think it's just more of that message of being proactive and preventative. But
well,
uh,
especially these young guys. I mean, my guys, they come in at 20 years old, and I'll tell you uh, when the reality starts to set in. Either they get a girlfriend they start dating somebody they see long term with, or they get married, and then they want to come talk to me. You know,
mhm,
like, hey, my wife wanted to know, what are my benefits? And it's like, you 4 years, you don't know what your benefits are, and they don't. They really don't, because these young guys, especially, I mean, there's not a reason for them to care till there's a reason for them to care. And then
exactly.
I start seeing, and I try to talk to them, and I mean, I had a young guy in here the other day. He made me so mad, but I literally on a whiteboard in my conference room wrote on it like I was a kindergarten teacher breaking down financial with me. I just broke down money. And he was like, I had no clue. And this guy's probably almost 30.
Yeah. You are a coach.
Try to be.
Yeah.
Try to be.
Yeah, I had there was a guy, because financial wellness is a conversation I think everywhere right now. Everyone's like really trying to figure out how to, have those conversations. And I had a guy who's like, I had to chat GPT. He's like, I had no idea. And he was probably in his 40s. He's like, don't know what to do. And I'm chat GPTing everything, So um yeah, I think just more awareness, more education. Obviously you guys are already doing that. So I think it's great. But I think at the end of the day, people have to want it for themselves, like they have to like take action for themselves. And, we could be talking until we're blue in the face, but until they decide to take that step, it's really hard to, force the hand.
Right.
Well, I appreciate your time. I'll get you going here. I did want to ask you, I know, obviously you guys are already doing a lot kind of in the wellness space, but do you think there's anything that I do that would be helpful for you guys?
I mean, I think we're on the right track. Um, I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Okay. Yeah, let me know. I'll get you the videos. We'll talk here in a couple weeks. I will, if I get them done earlier, I'll let you know, but I'll send you a calendar invite so we can stay in touch.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Have fun this weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.